I'd like to introduce our speaker for tonight. I'd just ask members to mute their microphones now, please, if they can. If there are any microphones that are open, Sally will probably cut them off if she can. So our speaker tonight is Randall Reeves, who I had the pleasure of going through rehearsal with him the other day. And I was keen to find out if he is actually crazy, and I'm pleased to report he's not, but quite why he did this voyage, I've absolutely no idea, but it is going to be a fascinating talk of a couple of laps around the world and once around the Americas or something like that anyway. So I'm thoroughly looking forward to it. And after Randall's made his talk, I hope Tony Gooch has managed to join us, because Tony is going to present the Barton Cup to Randall, because of course Randall was awarded the OCC's highest prize, or greatest prize, which is the Barton Cup last for his voyage in 2019. So it's 3 or 4 minutes past 9 in the UK. We've got 50 people online, Randall.
Wow.
Please go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining this evening. It's a great pleasure to be able to address the Ocean Cruising Club. I'll talk more about it at the end of the presentation, but as I said to Simon, I had never won anything more than a pizza before, so it was quite a shock actually to receive word from him that I had won the Barton Cup. To be quite frank, I had to look up what that was at that point, but once I figured it out, I was incredibly honored. So thank you very much. I have not joined other clubs to date. Single-handing does not lend itself to group activities, and so I have been very pleased to be a part of the Ocean Cruising Club, and am honored today to be able to talk to you about the Figure 8 voyage. One challenge with presentations like this is a guy feels like he's talking into the void. So Simon, can I just do a sound check with you again, just to make sure I'm coming through?
Randall, we can see you, we can hear you very clearly. It's all working well. So carry on.
Okay, okay. Carrying on very quickly, and this is for my wife, who would tell you very quickly that I'm poor at self-promotion. So instead of sticking this slide, which I always forget to talk about at the end of the presentation, which is what I would prefer, just a quick notice that on the way by, I have a book that I have published on the Figure 8 voyage called, surprisingly enough, the Figure 8 voyage. I came back from the 2 attempts with a lot of media. I was blessed with Fleet Broadband 250, so I was able to send high-res photographs and even videos from sea. And so what I've decided to do is break the media out and have a picture book, coffee table style type book, about 100 pages, focusing mostly on the imagery of the 2 attempts. And I'm working feverishly on a narrative to come out later in the year, hopefully before Christmas. So if you're interested, have a look at my website, figure8voyage.com, or you can text 555-888 with the word MOLI. And with that, we will begin. I have a couple of places within the body of the presentation that we can take breaks, Simon, to take questions if people would like. Did we talk about using IM for sending questions to you?
Everybody has had that instruction in the email I sent them, Randall, but I just remind folk that if people want to ask questions, if you could send those to me using the chat function on GoToMeeting. I'm monitoring that. That's the little bubble on the top right of my screen. It may be somewhere else on your screen. But if you drop me a line, I will bring people in the order that the questions are asked. But it just saves obviously people opening their microphone and interrupting Randall. So yeah, great.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm an American. We don't read instructions, so I wanted to make sure people knew. So let us begin. It began simply enough, inoffensively enough, unobtrusively enough, as a small closed low spinning off the east coast of South America, right off the coast of Rio de Janeiro. This while Molly and I were an entire ocean away, just rounding Cape Good Hope and entering the Indian Ocean. And a few days later, it still didn't look like much, still a small closed low, although I had to note when I got the weather report that it had crossed half of the ocean to us in just a couple of days. But by the time the low arrived, it had become fairly mean. It had shrunk up and gotten very intense, especially in the northwest quadrant. And it was pretty clear that Mo and I were in for some very interesting weather. By this time, Mo and I were almost down to 50 degrees south. We had been headed by light northeasterlies, and I was hoofing it, seeing this coming, trying to get back up into the north, trying to get back into the northern quadrant of the low. And I just made it to just below the Crozet Islands when the storm broke, and it was intense. Not the biggest wind we'd seen so far in the figure eight voyage. Winds were 40, gusting 50. We'd seen much more in the South Pacific, but the seas here were just the most intense that I had seen to date. Very high, very steep, long parallel trains of breaking seas, breaking for as far as I could see in either direction. During the night, Mo was thrown down several times hard, and I couldn't figure out quite what to do. In a gale like this, when it's full rain and snow and the sky is completely obliterated, you can't see anything except occasionally a little bit of phosphorescent glow from a sea just before it overwhelms the boat. So when dawn started to come on, I saw that we were not quite in the position that I thought would be most advantageous, especially because winds were moving from the northwest into the west. And so I decided to wear around, take the seas on a different angle. And I had just gotten below, I had just returned into the pilot house when I felt Mo literally picked straight up in the air and thrown off the top of a sea and down into the trough. Those of you who have not seen pictures of my boat, it's 45 feet long and it's almost 20 tons. So having a vessel of that size thrown, as it was quite disconcerting. The landing was soft like a pillow, but suddenly as we came up, I could see water everywhere. I remember distinctly as we came righted from the knockdown, I could see the ocean now through that window that had previously been covered with spume and spray, and I could now hear the crashing seas, because when Mo's closed up, as she had been, locked in fact, she's pretty quiet below, but now I could hear the gale and I could see glass and water everywhere. And it was only after those three things occurred in my brain did I realize that we had put out a window, that being thrown over and knocked down had broken a window in the pilot house. I was shocked, to put it mildly. I am the fourth owner of this boat. Each owner has taken the boat into harm's way. No owner has had the misfortune to break a window. And what that means is that even though storm shutters were on the to-do list, well, the to-do list was rather long before departing San Francisco, and storm shutters were not aboard. So now I have a problem. We're at the tail end of a low pressure system that is the worst weather I have ever experienced in my life. I have a boat full of water and a big hole, and I don't know what to do. So I did what every prudent sailor does when he doesn't know what to do. He grabs a handle and pumps the bilge. And I pumped for about an hour. And by that time had realized that even though I didn't have storm shutters, I had two bunk boards up in the forepeak that I could press together with threaded all thread on either side. And that's what I did. I had to, by this time, the drogue was out, the boat was stopped, the gale was attenuating, and I was able to get the bunk boards on either side of the window. They didn't quite fit, as you can see here. Down to the left-hand side of that bunk board is a little opening which I filled with silicone. But that did me. That put us back into shape. But as you can see, the broken window was right over Mo's navigation station, and it knocked out pretty much everything that you see, with the exception of the chart plotter and an inReach, Garmin inReach, which was my only connection. I reached out to my wife and I said, please contact Tony Gooch. I need a little bit of help getting weather. And Tony was kind enough to feed me weather for the remainder of that leg. One wonders at times like these, what on earth he is doing out in the middle of the ocean. So just to make it clear, my attempt was what we call the figure eight, an attempt to sail around the Americas and Antarctica in one season, solo. To put that into some context, the trip, as I imagined it, was a departure from San Francisco, sailing all the way south to Cape Horn. make a hard left, sail all the way around the Southern Ocean, passing under Cape Horn for a second time. Hard left turn there up the Atlantic, up as far as you can go in the Atlantic, up onto Davis Strait and Baffin Bay. Hard left, this is, by the way, a trip of left turns. Hard left turn into the Arctic, across the top of Canada and Alaska, through the Aleutians, through the Gulf of, across the Gulf of Alaska, back to San Francisco. The goal is to do that all in 1 year, 1 season, as I call it, because one ends up spending the entire year in more or less summertime, and solo. One can break this out when thinking about the difficulty into 2 distinct legs, one I call the open ocean route. So this is the classic Clipper route. This is all the big square rigged ships, the route they took when they were transporting their goods from Europe to Asia and back. This is the Golden Globe route. This is the Vendée Globe route. This is the Everest of sailing, right? San Francisco down to the Southern Ocean, around and up into the Arctic. This is about 31,000 miles of the total, and its big challenges were just what you'd imagine, right? Lots of ocean and big wind. My intention was to do this all nonstop, San Francisco around the bottom and back up into the Arctic. And I anticipated I would see, if I saw land at all, I would see Cape Horn during the many months it would take to accomplish that leg. The second leg is about as different from the first as you can imagine. It is not open ocean sailing at all. It's all pilotage in very shallow, close, poorly charted waters that are very frequently clogged with pack ice. So I had a really difficult time envisioning how to slice this as a more or less blue water sailor. So took off the year of 2014 to join Les and Allie Parsons in the Arctic on their Arctic turn for a practice run. And I'm really glad I did. I learned a tremendous amount. I don't know how I would have sliced the Arctic by myself without having visited it first. This leg is about 5,000 miles from Arctic Circle on one side to Arctic Circle on the other. And other than the pack ice and the poorly charted waters, one of the biggest challenges is you've only got about 60 days to make it through in a good year. So those are the 2 routes. It became fairly clear to me early on that the boat that I had, which I adored, a little 31-foot catch-rigged Mariner, was just not suited for this task. Pretty much any boat can sail pretty much anywhere, given the right conditions, but to increase my odds of success, I looked around for something a little more appropriate for the voyage. I knew I needed, for example, I needed a boat big enough that could comfortably hold a year's worth of stores and lots of water. It needed to be big enough, long enough waterline to make the miles. I needed to do roughly, I thought, on average, about 140 miles a day. My little 25-foot waterline catch was only good for about 110. It needed to be a boat that was big, but again, it needed to be small enough that I could handle it easily, have a simple sail plan and a simple setup. And then, of course, it needed to be strong enough to take on the continuous big seas and big winds down south, and then the pack ice up north. And this is what I, after 3 years, by the way, of searching, because we don't do metal boats on the West Coast at all here in America. It took about 3 years to find this boat I call Mo Lee. She's a Dublin Jessie 45. An expedition sloop, all aluminum, with a pretty amazing pedigree. By the time I acquired her, she had done quite a number of miles already. She built for an adventurer named Clark Steed, who wanted to be the first person to sail around the Americas, Germany through the Arctic, down around Cape Horn, back to Germany. This he did in the early 1990s. And then she was acquired by someone that you will know well, Tony and Corin Gooch, who are parts of the Ocean Cruising Club. Tony owned the boat for, as I think I'm aware, 16 years, and as far as I can tell, sailed everywhere there is water, especially above 50 degrees south. Long, wonderful voyages, one of which was a solo nonstop from Victoria in, I believe, 2003. Then early in the 2000s, the boat was acquired by Anne and Glenn Bainbridge, also part of the Ocean Cruising Club, who took the boat on a very adventurous trip through the Northwest Passage in 2014. And that's where I met Joa, who then years later, became Mo Lee, fortunately for me. Mo is about, well, I'm a bit prejudiced, I will admit, about perfect as a high latitude adventure boat. Very, very strongly built, 10mm aluminum down at the keel, 8 at the turn of the bilge, 2 watertight bulkheads, one fore and one aft. Very large tankage for a boat of this size. She carries 200 gallons of water and 200 gallons of fuel. So what that means for me, being a single-hander who knows he uses about 3/4 of a gallon of fresh water a day, I leave San Francisco with a good 240 or so days of water aboard, and with any success catching water, which I had, I forego the need for a water maker. Small engine, 48 horsepower Buick, but lots of fuel, which gives me lots of range in the Arctic. Super important. Lots of fuel to be had in the Arctic, but not a lot of wind, at least not consistently. So motoring very long distances between villages is something that needs to be accounted for. Mo is very simple. Tiller, no steering, quadrant, no cables. She does have very robust autopilots, but I did almost all of the self-steering on a monitor wind vane. So, and a sail plan, by the way, that is also quite simple, sloop rigged, but with twin head sails, which means that a predominantly downwind route, which the figure 8 is a lot of time spent on those head sails, which is very, very simple rig. This is, the knockdown happened in February of 2018, and it took about 48 days to limp into Tasmania for repairs. This, by the way, was my second big knockdown and my second stop. The first knockdown had happened right here, about a week west of Cape Horn. I had, within the course of a couple of days, lost both automatic steering devices and had to hand steer into Ushuaia for about a week. That put me behind. The knockdown in the Indian Ocean put me very much behind. And so now I was faced with a problem. What to do? If I departed from Hobart after repairs, I'd be approaching Cape Horn very, very late in the season. And that wasn't the worst of it. I would be arriving into the Arctic just barely on time if nothing went wrong. Several things had gone wrong. I proved something going wrong was quite easy to do. The other option was to just hang out and wait for the next season, but that didn't have much adventure to it. And so I had discussed with Tony a couple of times over the inReach, something I didn't actually breach with my wife until she arrived with her large suitcase full of spare parts. And that was, I wanted to sail home and start again. And I remember distinctly the dinner we were having. It was lovely pasta dinner, lovely Chianti wine. Here we are in Hobart, and my wife, who thinks I'm about done, I've been beat up twice, she thinks I'm probably going to give up. I say, honey, I'd really like to single hand home and start the figure 8 again, and her jaw dropped. But my lovely wife was raised in a cruising family and understands the cruising urge, and so was very quick to come around to the possibility. So did that. Departed Hobart, sailed below Stewart Island and all the way home, and arrived in late July of 2018. We had at this point a circumnavigation under our belts of 3 stops, 26,000 miles and change in 253 days. Heavy sigh. That's a pretty big accomplishment, but it was nothing close to what I was trying to do. Quick turnaround. I left myself only 3 months to get ready for try number 2, but luckily by this point I knew the boat well, and because of the 2 repair stops, she was in pretty good nick. So there were really only 3 things to do: a quick haul and another coat of bottom paint. Yes, adding storm shutters to the inventory did occur, and then reprovision. For those of you, I'm sure many of you have provisioned for long passages. Provisioning for a year is a beast of a different sort. And this is a pile of food in the living room of the house, and it is not all of it by any means. Let's see, 35, 40 pounds of coffee, 12 cans of Nido dried milk. Remember, I don't have refrigeration or freezer on the boat. It's a very simple boat by choice. So no fridge, no freezer, no way to take frozen foods. So all the food is dried or canned. Dried nuts, rice, beans, milk, coffee, some dried cheeses, and of course several cases of ambrosia. My wife was born in Greenwich and raised in Suffolk. I am told this is one of the best foods ever invented, so I had several cases of that along as well. September 30, 2018. Those of you unfamiliar with weather along the Pacific coast, our September, October, early November is our summertime here in San Francisco. Sadly, it means typically no wind. And this is Mo departing under the Golden Gate Bridge for try number 2 under power, sadly, with her flotilla of exactly 1 in attendance. But I have to say, I was feeling pretty comfortable on this day. When I departed the year before for try number 1, it was a grueling day. It was not Indian summer. The fog was low on the water. It had been sunny in Little Horseshoe Cove from where I departed. As soon as I got out into the bay, the fog came down. I turned to wave at Joanna for the last time, and she was gone. She hustles out to Point Bonita Lighthouse. I try to sail in a little too close. Shouldn't have got that close to Point Bonita. Never saw her. I just never got to wave to my wife. Never got to say really goodbye. And I was in fog for 2 days trying to get off coast. It was very unnerving. I had no idea what I was getting into. But now I had a good sense of what I was headed for. And I knew, among other things, that I had a good 50, 60 days of beautiful Pacific sailing headed south, open weather, trade wind sailing, warm, just a lovely way to get used to the boat in the ocean again. It turned out to be a very light wind year in both the north and the southern hemisphere trades. Lots and lots of sailing on the asymmetrical, which is a lot of fun. Feels fast even when it isn't in a big boat like mine, but it's a great way to sail. And it gave me a chance to kind of get into the route. Day 24, I believe it was, crossing the line, October 24. Actually, I can't see day. It's covered up by the, Simon, what does that say? Day?
Day 24.
Day, I just took 24. Okay,
Yeah.
well, very good.
Yep.
That was right. And we're just having a lovely time, a lovely sail headed south. Along about 30 degrees south, it becomes time to begin putting stuff together for the big wind you know is coming at you. So that's what one does. I didn't know what, on the right-hand top picture, I didn't know what that was initially when I bought the boat. One of my jokes is that Tony Gooch, I ended up with a boat that came with a living, breathing owner's manual. A custom boat like this doesn't have an owner's manual, and she had a great amount of kit aboard that I had no idea what to do with. One of them were these little discs of stainless steel you see in the top right, and it didn't really occur to me until we were in our first Southern Ocean gale that an Endurade vent, which is designed to keep the air coming in and the water out, can actually be overwhelmed when full-on green seas are breaking over the boat. Learned very quickly right after that, those little stainless steel shutters are made to close off the door raids. Did that on round number 2 before we got too deeply south. Also, I had in San Francisco added Lexan over all of the ports, and here I am simply sealing it up a little bit. The boat has a beautiful Harken rig, big Selden rig, big and heavy and beefy, but still needs a little repair. And I have to say, just by way of a little humor relative to pointing at me, that this doesn't matter how often one does an eye splice for the topping lifts, that I just can never ever remember to put the snap jackal in the loop before I close the loop off. But in any case, lots of work to be done before you hit southern high latitudes. Among those are getting the drogues out and making sure they're flaked properly. Mo carries 2, a Jordan series drogue on the left-hand side there, a Hail Mary, I don't know what to do now kind of device, stops the boat cold, makes the boat safe. And then on the right, a drogue I was given from Zach, who designed it. It's called a Shark drogue, very different technology, different idea. A slowing drogue allows one to make way, but adds a lot of friction and slows the boat down, which I used several times when there was weather in front of me I wanted to slide on by before arriving. So made sure those were in good condition, flaked and ready to go. Our first big weather came at about 45 degrees south, and it was a full 4 days of force 8 and force 9 weather. I had felt I learned in round number 2 my mistake, and I felt my mistake in round number 2 with all the knockdowns and all the injuries we'd sustained was that I wasn't going fast enough. Speed is safety, and I was staying too long on the storm jib, especially in the latter phase of a low when the wind begins to let off a bit, but the seas stand up. I wasn't giving the boat enough opportunity to steer itself in really extreme conditions. So my vow this time was to put the storm jib away and not use it at all, to carry everything on the number 2. This would allow me to more easily get more sail area out as a big weather system began to pass off and through. And that was working really, really well. We were having a beautiful run. It was just so much fun to be sailing fast. We even surfed. I mean, a big, heavy, full keel boat like mine, surfing down this enormous sea, throws out a rooster tail and these big roaring seas coming off the side of it. It was just lovely. And I was so happy with how things were going. I found myself whistling to my favorite Handel flute concerto. So I made a video. I could send videos from sea. Made a video of myself whistling along with this music interspliced with the big seas we were experiencing, and felt chuffed with myself and sent that off to be posted on my website. And a couple of days later, I got an email from a friend of mine. He said, you know what? I know what your problem is. You're whistling in big weather. You're not supposed to whistle in heavy weather. That's bad luck. Oh my goodness. I didn't know I was having a problem at this point, but I knew that was bad luck. I'd read all the O'Brien novels both ways. I should have known better. So I made a small duct tape sign for myself that I stuck over the companionway hatch. And of course, you can't actually even say the word on a boat when it's underway. So I left out the vowels in the middle, left that up until I remembered not to whistle, because when you're having a good time, it's just, sometimes it's hard to remember that. Cape Horn, finally it's time. We end up having very good weather, strong winds, 30, 35 knots, but from exactly the right direction allowed me to pass above Diego Ramirez and right under Cape Horn with 3 rolls in both head sails. Beautiful, well, not beautiful, raining and snowing and cold, but just a beautiful day to pass under Cape Horn. Day 56 of the second figure-8 voyage attempt. We passed 56 degrees south, and now we enter the Southern Ocean proper. I recall distinctly having Tony around the kitchen table here at the house and asking him, so how did you slice up your go-around of the Southern Ocean? And he basically said, you stay as far south as you dare. And there are 2 reasons for that. One is that the further south you go, as you go around that circle, that bit around Antarctica, the further south you can stay, the fewer miles you will have to sail. The goal was to hit down and stay down at 47 degrees south, a good bit further south than most boats venture. The Golden Globe, Bendy Globe boats are usually up around 40, 42, 39, 40 up there, mostly because of ice worries. But down at 47, I figure we saved as much as 15 to 1,800 miles on the circumnavigation of the south, just because we remained at a higher latitude. The other reason I think you can see from this windy TV shot, which shows you the lows passing through with my white course line. And you can see that the lows tend to stay at roughly the same latitude. In this particular case, the center is at around 55 degrees south. And yes, there is strong wind in the low, but if you're not careful, and especially if you're too far north, you end up becalmed between the lows. And it's very common to have 50 knots one day, a couple of days later to be waffling back and forth with no wind at all. So the goals too are, 1, to go far south to cut down the number of miles of a circumnavigation, and 2, to get head down into the much stronger, but also much more consistent wind. As it turned out, lack of wind was not an issue for us. Our first big gale after Cape Horn came just north of the Falklands. I'm down below. The boat is just being turned around. Again, it's one of those, you can't see the seas except for maybe the faint glow of a breaker occasionally. And this wham, Mo's pooped, and this huge sea comes slamming up against the back. And I hear this, I'm in my bunk, which is farther forward. I hear all of this water pushing into the pilot house, and I think, oh no, here we go again. But as it turns out, it was just water that had squirted in between a tiny, tiny crack between the companionway hatch and the companionway slide. Eric Hiscock was once asked, what is the best strategy for making a Southern Ocean passage? And he said simply, keep the water out. And as it turns out, that is quite difficult to do. Day 80 of the figure-8 voyage, we are making good time pretty fast. We are crossing the prime meridian just below Greenwich and making an approach to Cape Good Hope. I'm often asked, why, Simon? You are not the first to ask why. Would anyone want to do something like this? This actually came as quite a shock to me. I remember the first several presentations I gave for the figure-8 voyage before I'd left the first time. I thought why was obvious. As it turns out, most people, especially as they begin to hear the particulars of a voyage like this, are not really all that interested. So I will have to explain why, and it is encapsulated for me in a photograph like this. This is a wandering albatross. It is one of about 15 species of albatross, all of 2 of which live in the Southern Ocean only. This bird has a wingspan of 12 feet. That's the beam of my boat. It flies, it lives on the wing in the Southern Ocean 95% of its life. And it is simply a wonder to see. You will be in the strongest wind you have ever experienced and seas you don't know how to manage. You'll be hanging on for your life, and this bird will be hovering above the boat, not moving. It will look so still you think it's carved out of the sky. It is a wonder of nature, and it is all you need to see is that bird once to know why one would want to venture down into the high southern latitudes. It's just amazing. What is amazing on many levels is what you encounter in the South. When you make a middle latitude passage, you will see birds, you know, boobies and tropic birds and maybe others, but they will be occasional. In the South, the boat is just surrounded by bird life constantly. There will be clouds of prions, a little pigeon-sized bird, and hordes of petrels and storm petrels and albatrosses. You live in the community of these birds in these big seas, and it takes about a week to get used to it. These big seas, 15, 20-foot seas that are just there all the time. They are the play zone for these birds. I think it was Arthur C. Clarke once said that we mistake in calling it planet Earth. It's really planet ocean. What is it? 2/3 of the ocean is covered in this stuff. And I really wanted to see what it was like when you get out beyond land, out into that ocean, the Southern Ocean, where land is such a rarity. Simon, that's why.
I believe you.
See you down there, buddy. Let's see, I keep covering day 96 of the second attempt. Now we're at what I call the Antipodes. I'm at the opposite side of the globe from my home, way south of Mauritius and Madagascar, at 58 degrees east and about 46 south. Again, still making good time. We're nearing the Crozettes. Haven't had nearly the types of issues that we did on the first go-around in the Indian Ocean. Yes, the Indian Ocean is beautiful. It is the most beautiful thing you will ever be able to spend many months in. But that does not make it easy. This is a photograph of squalls. Between the gales in the south, when you're at this far south, between the gales oftentimes are squalls upon squalls. The ambient wind is already 30 knots, and then it zooms up to 50 as you get the leading edge of the squall coming through, and then there's hail and sleet and snow, and then you get to the back edge of this 15 knots of wind for a while, and then it's back up to 30, and you're running on 2 poles, and you're running fast, but it's reef in and reef out hour after hour, and you just don't know when you're ever going to sleep again. My sleep cycle on Mo is 90-minute increments. I allow myself as many 90-minute chunks as I feel I can get, but I never sleep for more than 90 minutes. So when I first started, I was sleeping in 60-minute increments. That had worked just fine for passages from, say, the States to Hawaii. But after a couple of 3 months of 60-minute sleeps, I began to feel like my knees were coming off my legs and my neck was beginning to expand and my head was going to blow up. So I extended the sleeping pattern a little bit. 90 minutes I felt after many months I could do probably indefinitely. But one thing in the South is you never really get many of those sleeps all at once. You're always on deck. The weather changes dramatically and often. And so sleeping with your head propped up against the binocular case like this was also a way of making it happen. Soft things wear out quickly in the South in particular. Hands do almost everything. And when they're wet all the time as they are in the South, the skin after a time begins to slough off. And if you've forgotten to throw on gloves before going on deck, and most of the times you don't have time for that, you come down with this beet red hand. Quite amazing. Top left image is an indication of why you should never try to do anything with the drogue bridle as the drogue is feeding over the stern. I did find several times, but on this particular occasion, I had gotten the drogue bridle wrapped around a cleat and was trying to free it quickly before it made its final fly over the stern. And I didn't quite make it. My hand got caught enough to just sprain it. I was lucky. It could have done much, much more damage as the weight came on the bridle. Other soft things that wear out. Everything that's soft wears out. The sheets, especially at the clew where they pass through the poles, wear out. The downhaul on the Wattensee, my electrical generation device, the hydro generator, only was good for a couple of thousand miles. The monitor wind vane tiller lines wore out. I even wore out the webbing on the Genoa, just pulled right through the ring at one point. Pretty much everything that moves will wear out at some point. Well, I didn't anticipate this. It's all covered up. Day 152 of the figure 8 voyage. Now we're directly below my departing point, directly below San Francisco, and about to make that swoop down toward Cape Horn again. A lovely warm day, one of the very few. The big question when approaching Cape Horn is what exactly to do. Like the Farallon Islands just off the coast here, off the Golden Gate Bridge, Cape Horn sits on the continental shelf, and right off south of Cape Horn, you run into extraordinarily shallow water. Water comes up from, say, 10, 14,000 feet deep to as much as 300 or 400 feet deep over the course of just several miles. Diego Ramirez sits on the edge of that shelf, and it is prudent, if there is anything like strong weather, to sail south of the Diego Ramirez Islands. But of course, one doesn't spend 3 months trying to get this around the Southern Ocean to not see Cape Horn for a second time. It was a big low coming through, but I thought the timing was just about right, that would blow through just as I was coming up to Cape Horn. I risked it, and as it turns out, I got to watch on that lovely dawn some of the biggest seas I'd seen in my life as we came in over the continental shelf. But the wind had backed off enough that we were able to scoot through with some relative ease. And so on day 166 of the second try of the figure 8, we slid under Cape Horn on a beautiful, just beautiful day. Strong wind, but almost clear. 110 days, 3 months and change to get around from Cape Horn to Cape Horn for the second time, some 15,000 miles. I was really pleased and really proud. And I remember putting on the whiteboard for that day, ever been done before? Twice under Cape Horn in one go. And my friends, who are not shy about putting me in my place when such is required, sent me the biography of a sailor named John Sanders, who back when I was a mere teenager had done, I think was it 3 and maybe even 4 times around under Cape Horn in one go. So still proud of that, but no, it was not quite the accomplishment that I initially had thought. I was extremely happy to turn north and head into warmer, calmer weather, but what I did not count on was how calm exactly it would be. The passage north to the northeast was terrible. We had terribly light winds, even in the trades. Slow. I had averaged 140 miles a day prior to this turning left and heading north, and we almost immediately sunk down to, I think, about an average of 120 miles a day. We saw nothing but weed from about 35 south to about 35 degrees north. Weed every day. When you're trying to generate power with a hydro generator, this is extremely problematic. Nothing we see in the Pacific, so it's quite a shock to me. Such that when we were a week or so from Halifax, and I saw this beautiful low pressure system sliding down out of the northeast, I thought, beautiful. We'll catch some wind. And my strategy was to sail it as fast north on the southwesterlies as I could, grab as much northing as was possible, and then simply to throw out the drogue when the winds went into the northeast and ride it out. And that was a beautiful strategy. I think that was the right strategy, but I had miscalculated where we were within the context of the Gulf Stream. I had been using the paper pilot charts as my indicator, and they are, I found out later, notoriously incorrect. And what we got were terribly steep seas and not a whole lot of wind, 35, 40 knots, huge seas. I'm on the drogue, I'm down below. I hear the sea crash over, Mo's pooped, And then I hear this crash, boom, bang. I run up on deck, and the bridle of this new Dyneema Jordan Series drogue, Dyneema line that floats, had let itself get picked up and wrapped around the monitor frame. And as the weight came on the body, weight came back on the bridle, had jerked the frame out of adjustment, had bent it about 15, 20 degrees, as you can see in that bottom right photograph. Not great, but by this time we were just a few days out of Halifax. There was no stopping us. And on September 30th of 2018, after 237 nonstop days at sea and a little over 31,000 miles, we pulled into Halifax. I love this photograph. From my perspective, look a bit zonked. I was met at the dock by the harbor master of the Nova Scotia Yacht Club, who handed me an envelope of cash, essentially, from some friends of mine, Tony and Connie, who had known I was heading in and knew I might need some refreshment at the bar, which was just across the street. It is not usual to be met at the dock, A, or B, be handed an envelope full of cash and be told that the beer is a direct left that away. And this was my surprise. But it was a lovely surprise and a lovely place to stop. And Simon, there a quick break if there are any questions. If not, I can keep.
Yeah, we have a few in.
Okay.
That sounds like Tony and Connie on. I think is that Sage? Because we met them in.
Yes, exactly. Tony and Connie.
Podcast.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, super. Doug Bruce wants to come in. He kind of answered the question already, but Doug, do you want to put your question again?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Yep.
Doug. Please go ahead.
Just a very simple question of the basic motivation for the trip. Why?
Oh, now see, I thought I'd answered that, but okay. I was bitten very young. My father was a merchant mariner, but we didn't sail until I was in high school, and sailed quite a lot. Learned sail on the rivers here, and then was beginning to get interested in big water sailing. And at that particular point, the San Francisco Bay was kind of big water sailing. When you sail on a river, the bay is huge. I was working for my college radio station at the time and got a letter from a guy I'd never heard of named Bernard Motessier. Just a publicity letter saying that he was interested in talking to any radio stations in Northern California about nuclear disarmament. So I did a little research and found out what he had done, and because I was enjoying sailing, decided to meet him in Martinez, California, where he had Joshua at that point, and just for a few months, and interviewed him. And only after the interview began to read about him and what he had done, and only then did I kind of have this, what you might call a blue water epiphany, like, oh, you could do that. So that was really the beginning of the blue water desire, was that meeting with Motessier and realizing there was a big blue world, big blue marble out there that I could explore by myself if I was of such a mind. That was the beginning.
It's no better inspiration to get off Morticia himself. There's a question from Tony Gibb. Tony, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I'm assuming you could hear me. Just in that first knockdown where you broke your windows, were you trailing a drogue? And if not, do you think the drogue would have stopped it?
I was not trailing. My philosophy, to the degree that there was one, was to sail through everything. Our first big blow was off Cape Horn, about a week west, 50 knots gusting 70. It was really big weather, and I had sailed through that, and we'd had a really good run for the most part. I was feeling pretty like I knew what I was doing. The Indian Ocean threw me a curveball, because especially where I was, just south of the Crozettes, it doesn't look like shallow water, but it is fairly shallow. There's an enormous shelf in that general area where the water comes up from. It's 10, 15,000 feet up to maybe 1,000 or two. So that, and I do also believe that I was catching some current, tails, hooks of current coming down from the Agulhas. So I was getting what were, for me and my naivete, really remarkable seas. I was sailing through it. The wind had started to tail off. I wasn't providing enough speed for the boat basically for the monitor to have enough power to do what it needs to do, and that's what was causing the control problems, that allowing the boat to slew sideways, get caught in a big breaking sea, lifted and thrown. No, I don't think that would have happened if I had been on the drogue. One of the beautiful things, especially about the Jordan series drogue, is it's immensely powerful. I've never tested this, but I'm quite certain that if you provide it with enough holding power on the boat in terms of resupported cleats, it'll pull you through a sea. It'll pull you through the back end of a sea, no problem. So I don't think that would have happened if I had been on a drogue. But at that point, Figure 8 1.0 for me was a big learning experience. I learned every week.
Randall, have you any idea how many times you streamed a drogue on the main Figure 8 voyage?
Yes, 3 times. Well, 3 times the Jordan series drogue during the first go around, and probably 2 or 3 times the Shark drogue. The Jordan series drogue, as I said at the top, is really a Hail Mary. The boat's out of control. I can't figure out how to control the boat throughout the Jordan series drogue. It stops the boat, keeps the stern pointed to the seas. You're reduced to 1 to 2 knots at most. There's a tremendous amount of drag in the Jordan series drogue, just tremendous. The Shark drogue I used several times when we were in strong winds. I didn't need the help, as it were, but I wanted to avoid the stronger winds further on that we would encounter if I kept going at speed.
Yeah. John Franklin wants to come in. John, you've got a question or a comment, I think.
Hi, Simon. Yeah, it was just a comment. I think in your introduction, and Randall picked it up later, that Moly was owned by several previous OCC owners, but there's another connection with the OCC, and that was, and I'm sure Tony will correct me if I'm wrong, but Tony and Corin were dismasted off the east coast of South America, and it must have been in the late 1990s. And Tony eventually had Tanui shipped to Lymington and engaged the late Michael Pocock to redesign the rig. And at the time, Mike was OCC Commodore. And then that rig design was used by Mike on the design of my boat, Al Shaheen.
Oh. Yes, Tony and I have talked about that. I renewed the rigging before leaving on the first attempt. And I will tell you that the guys at the yard at KKMI in San Francisco almost wouldn't put wire that large on my lowers are almost 1/2 inch. And they said, we don't do this on 100-foot yachts. What do we do with a 1/2 inch wire on this 40 little boat you have? And so I had to explain that my mentor and previous owner, Tony Gooch, had some experience of needing strength in a mast. I think Tony said, he'd said to Michael Pocock, I want to be able to roll the boat and come up with my mast. So Tony, I remember after the first go around in particular, Tony and I were talking about how pleased we were that we demonstrated that the boat could be knocked down repeatedly without really any injury to the rig at all. All right, let me continue on. We're about 2/3 of the way.
For sure.
Right.
Go ahead, Randall. Yeah.
So Halifax, again, just a really brief stopover in Halifax. Stopover for 2 reasons. One, I could, but mostly because I'm waiting. I'm too early. The Northwest Passage requires timing. And although I am not a fast boat, I was too fast on these first legs getting north. I arrived in Halifax, I believe, in July, whereas the eastern end of the Arctic at Lancaster Sound doesn't typically open until the first week or 2 of August. So I was forced to hang out. I was forced to take on more provisions, terrible, and to take on more beer. I left San Francisco with 180 cans of beer. I had put so much food and fuel and water on the boat that she must have been down by at least 3 or 4 inches. I just could not find another cubby for a can of beer, but I was very sad on day 181 when I reached into the icebox and found there was nothing there. So restocked with beer and left. Middle July, headed up toward the Arctic. We reached the Arctic Circle on July 26, headed north, and it was there that we began to encounter icebergs. Of course, when you hit the north, the first thing you encounter is not pack ice, unless you were not very smart. Mostly what you're encountering are icebergs, those that have flown down to you from Greenland around the east side, around the bottom of Cape Farewell, and are flowing back north up on the southerly current that flows up the west coast of Greenland. A couple of shots, this is a beautiful cathedral-esque bird, very, very common. Notice how calm and beautiful it is. This also is, although not like San Diego weather, this is also fairly common. One thing I was very happy to learn, being a single-hander, was that icebergs of any size show up quite easily on the radar, as you can see in that top right-hand photograph. It is just remarkable, especially after spending so much time in the south where all you see is water, big seas and water. Now you're in what is mostly calm. You're above the Arctic high. There is not much wind. There's a lot of motoring up here, but the bergs and their variety take the place of the wandering albatross, maybe. Bergs that are cathedral-esque, bergs that look like Dr. Seuss castles, bergs that are tabular. When you're out in the middle of Davis Strait and you're encountering a very large berg, you'll oftentimes see the brash flowing off of it. In fact, oftentimes the brash will show up on radar as well. You'll see the big target that is the berg itself, and then this kind of hazy brash, hazy targets flowing off of it, and that shows you basically the flow of the current. The larger berg is not really tagged in or tucked into the surface currents and winds, but the brash is, and so you get a sense of where things are actually flowing. One's course, how am I doing, Sam? I'm getting a slow connection warning.
It's coming through fine. You're fine.
Okay. One's strategy for a passage up and toward the Arctic typically is to make a passage up the west coast of Greenland. Very typically, very typically in the middle bits, you'll have what's called the middle pack, leftover pack ice from the summer. Back in the olden days, it was very typical to head far more north than Upernavik before turning left and going around the top of the middle pack. But on this particular passage north, we had a lot of open water, and even from just a bit south of Upernavik, from Sondra Upernavik, I could make a head into the Arctic. Into Pond Inlet was the target. Those of you who have not been into the Canadian Arctic might find it surprising. We envision the Arctic as being where Father Christmas lives, but in matter of fact, when you arrive, especially in summertime, what it really looks like is Arizona. It's very, very dry, an arid, deserty climate with beautiful tabletop mountains, flat top mountains everywhere. These fluted drives from the erosion over the many, many years, but extremely not what you're expecting if you've not been there before. Almost no vegetation. Of course, one is way above tree level at this point. That is one of the definitions of the Arctic Circle, that point at which, north of which, trees do not grow. In the bottom left-hand photograph there, you'll see just a little bit of green off to the left of where I'm anchored. That's a forest. That's what feeds the muskox. How, I do not know, but that is about the most vegetation you get at this particular latitude. This is Lancaster Sound at about 72 to 74 degrees north. Here's a chart that we use, an ice chart produced once daily by Environment Canada, showing the concentrations of surface ice in tenths of total. So the white is land, the red colors are the ice. Red is 9 to 10 tenths ice, so almost total ice cover. And then the colors grade down from that to the green, which is in the 2 to 4 tenths range. Mo is a very strong boat, but she's not an icebreaker. So what I'm looking for as I make my passage through Peel or Prince Regent is something a lot less than what you're seeing in Peel Sound, that opening to the left there. At the point that I took this screenshot, Mo and I are up here, the south side of Devon Island, kind of hanging out in the anchorages up there, corresponding daily with Victor Weger, who's a member of the OCC and and the ice guide for most of us who make an attempt like this. And it was, though generally looking like a fairly good year, the ice in these two passages was being extraordinarily stubborn. Here we are, late in August, and I still don't have any good way of making it through either Peel or Prince Regent. Many boats ahead of me are already way deep into Peel Sound. They're in 5, 6, 7 tenths ice. They've got 2 people on the bow with ice poles. They're jamming the boat into ice and wedging their way through, and they're making 15, 20 miles in a 24-hour period. I can't do that. I need a clearer shot than that, and I'm waiting, and it's beginning to look like it's not going to work. Strange thing about the Arctic is it's like a maze with gates that open and close. Ice will lay over a point here and open over another one there, and then when yours is clear here, the one in back of you or the one in forward of you may close. And it only really takes one ice gate closure to really screw up the entire passage. It doesn't take ice everywhere to make things very difficult. So I recall corresponding with Victor a particular night saying, I don't know, this is looking a bit dicey. What do you think? And I remember receiving an email from him the next morning with a Victor pep talk, which was basically, you've sailed all the way to the north, and now you're whinging about a little bit of ice. Gird your loins, my son, and charge on. And so I did. Thank you, Victor. Made a charge into that kind of ice that you're seeing there in Peel Sound. Bellot Strait was just blocked. There was just no way through it, even though Prince Regent was looking okay. So I made an attempt on Peel Sound, and I remember as we came south through Lancaster and into Peel, first it's just a little chunk of ice here and there, and then it's 1 and 2 tenths ice, and then it's 3 and 4 tenths ice, and then suddenly you're in 5 tenths ice, and suddenly it's getting really kind of dicey. But you realize, wow, I'm hand steering, and I can actually see a way forward. I can see a lane just in time to move the boat around this chunk and around that chunk, and it's actually super exhilarating. You're going flat out full speed. It feels like lightning speed, right? It's only 7 knots, but it feels fast, and you're bobbing and weaving, and it's a lot of fun. And I realized, hey, we can do this, and it's exhilarating and it's fun for about the first 18 or 20 hours, and then you just get really cold and tired. One of the challenges in the Arctic is sleep. If the way ahead is clear, you must charge on. There is just no waiting. This is not a pleasure cruise. So I was always fighting sleep deprivation. I would usually, instead of anchoring somewhere, just heave to for half an hour or an hour, then get up and charge on. All hand steering. There's almost no motoring under autopilot in these kinds of conditions. There's just too much ice. I remember distinctly, I had been hand steering for what just seemed like days, and I finally saw ahead a blue patch. I couldn't actually see any ice at all ahead. Wonderful, excellent. I can dash down for a brief nap. Left the boat going, flipped on the autopilot. I set the alarm for 5 minutes, just a 5-minute snooze. It's really all I need. I will feel so much better. And on the 4th minute of my 5-minute snooze, wham,
Wow.
the boat just dead stop. Went from 7, 8 knots to nothing. The engine ground right down, almost stalled out. I flew into the cockpit, threw the engine into neutral, and looked ahead, and we had T-boned an ice block about the size of a school bus. And I don't know how I didn't see it. It was right, well, clearly it was right there. And I was sure for the next several hours that Mo was sinking. I had good access to her insides, and I could see that there was no water coming in, but we seemed down by the bow, and then we seemed to be listening to starboard, and that just freaked me out. It wasn't until I got to the next anchorage and put the dinghy over the side and rode forward that I couldn't actually find any damage to the boat at all. None. Amazed. Actually, I take that back. The one item that did not survive that encounter was the forward-looking sonar right at the bow of the boat. And I was lucky that it is one that the Bainbridges had installed as one to shear off such that it won't leak, because it's in a very difficult place. But that was the only loss, and that was nothing compared to what could have happened. Day 343 of the figure 8 voyage. Now we're passing out of the Arctic, passing south of 65, 63 and a half, north, passing over the Arctic Circle, headed not toward Hawaii, unfortunately. I was looking forward to Hawaii, but headed instead to Nome, where we pull in a few days later one tends to make a passage through the Arctic in these informal caravans because you're all coming up to the same closed ice gate at the same time. And you tend to maneuver them and pass through them at roughly the same time. So I was the slow boat in this particular flotilla and arrived in Nome after everyone else there. But at 3 in the morning on this particular day, everyone turned out to greet me. We had passed out of the Arctic. We were out of the ice. We all felt relieved and like it was a straight shot home. I, for one, felt all I have to do is get through the Aleutians, through the Gulf of Alaska. I've been around the Southern Ocean. I've been through the Arctic. It's a piece of cake to get home, no problem. Until about 3 days offshore. One of the peculiarities of weather here off the shore of California is we get these large high pressure systems that move in and pinch up against the low pressure system, the hot weather systems inland, and create these really strong gales of straight north winds straight down the coast. I saw it coming, didn't think too much about it because it's just a couple of days and the current is going in the same direction as the low. But boy, when it landed, it was a doozy. 35, 40, 45, 50 knot winds, big seas, much bigger than I anticipated, right offshore here, 300 miles offshore, Drake's Bay, which was my target. I was in danger of being pushed below, but I put Mo on straight beam reach, and luckily it didn't sustain any damage at all in that particular blow. And on October 19, 2019, Mo and I sailed under the Golden Gate Bridge. We were greeted by friends and family at the Sausalito Yacht Club. Lovely, lovely day. My wife Joanna met me there for champagne and exchanges, and it was just a great experience to meet there. I think Tony Gruch was there and several other members of the Ocean Cruising Club, and that was the Figure 8 Voyage 2.0. 384 days away, of which 306, I believe, days at sea. 39,000 miles and change. A long, beautiful trip. Very lucky to have been able to try once and again to accomplish the Figure 8. I want to just say briefly before I close that I owe a huge debt of gratitude to many officers of the Ocean Cruising Club. I am not a club guy. I'd never belonged to a club before. Tony said to me, "Hey, you should join this club called," what is that? The Ocean Cruising Club. Glad I did, because every time I stopped, whether it was whether it was Ushuaia or Hobart or Halifax or St. John's, I was immediately greeted by the port officer for the Ocean Cruising Club there, and I was pointed in the direction of those people who knew exactly and quickly how to help me out. It was pretty amazing. I always needed help, it seemed, and lots of it. And so, people like John Sullivan and Roxana Diaz, John Vincent, Ted Laurentius were big, big helps. Of course, Victor, with whom I corresponded at least once, usually twice a day, from Arctic Circle to Arctic Circle, was a great, great support and help for the Northwest Passage. And many thanks to Daria for her work with our PR team as I got back, in particular, helping to get the word out. Some other just members, I've already mentioned Tony and Connie. Garrett Margraf, who runs a yacht named Thor, was basically my mechanical go-to guy. Daryl Ridgway in Hobart, a boat builder, used to build dragons, helped me put Mo back together after the knockdown. Pam Wall, who I'm sure you all know, was instrumental early on in helping me acquire. And Tony in particular, who's become a very good friend and a mentor for the Figure 8. Thank you all. Being a part of the Ocean Cruising Club has been fantastic.
Randall, what a fantastic talk. That was really, really super.
Thanks, Victor.
I'm going to pass the microphone to, I don't know, about 10,000 miles away to Tony Gooch, who I think is standing by, I hope, in British Columbia or perhaps Alaska. I'm not too sure where he is, but Randall won the Martin Cup for that, and Tony, who was the previous abuser of Molly, is tonight's going to make a presentation. Tony, are you there? I can see you on the screen.
I am, Simon. Do you?
Please.
I'll put a picture on too. Simon, do you read me?
Yes, please do.
I can hear you. I can't see you at the moment, Tony, but please press your camera.
I believe Tony is somewhere around where I put the red pointer.
Okay.
Could be. Simon, thank you for asking me to do this. And what a great talk, Randall. I really enjoyed it, and so did everybody else. And on behalf of the OCC members, many of whom have followed you all around this voyage as you executed it, was such an exceptional and challenging voyage. It's certainly my pleasure to virtually present you with the OCC's premier award, the Barton Cup. So if you would all please unmute your mics and join me in applauding Randall on this very outstanding voyage. Congratulations.
Thank you all very much. It was, as I explained at the top, it was a great.
Can we just mute mics for a while Randall's going to respond, I think. Randall, go ahead.
Well, just a very brief thank you again to everybody. It has been a lot of fun being associated with the Ocean Cruising Club over the years. I have learned a great deal from a number of your members. It is clearly a great value club to be a part of. So thank you for that, and thank you for the recognition. As I said at the top, I'm not a yacht club guy by nature, but receiving an award is not, it doesn't suck, as we would say here in California. So thank you very much. And I wanted to take an opportunity as she's walking through the house to introduce you to my lovely wife, Joanna,
Good evening,
who is the one of the driving forces behind the Figure 8 voyage. Quite clearly, if my wife hadn't let me go, none of this would ever have happened. She was my inspiration. She understood exactly what it was I was trying to do. She talked me through a great number of very difficult times. And so many thanks to my lovely wife, Joanna, for her help in the Figure 8 voyage. Joanna Bloor.
Great.
I can hear the clapping.
Yeah, people are clapping. All right. Any other questions for me?
We do have some more questions for you, Randall. So I think first in order was Ellen Massey-Leonard, who gave the talk about the Marquesas the other day. So Ellen, do you want to ask your question? Two questions, I believe.
60.
Yeah, I had two questions. One was, how well did your wind vane steer in the big seas and wind that you encountered? And my other question was how difficult it was to retrieve your drogues, particularly the Jordan series drogue, which I understand puts an awful lot of drag on the boat, which is of course the point, but then bringing it back aboard. So those are my questions.
Excellent questions, thank you. The boat steers very well. I think it's a monitor wind vane. So a mechanical device hung off the stern. It's actually made about 10 miles from my house here in San Leandro, California. An excellent, beautiful device. I adore it. It steers very well. I think one of the early marketing lines was steers better than the average helmsman, which is certainly better than me. I am way below the average helmsman. Of course, any device begins to struggle in very, very large seas, and one of the ways to help is to throw out the shark drogue, which adds a lot of stability to the boat. But no, for the most part, the monitor does very, very well. It is incumbent upon the sailor, of course, to trim the boat and to trim the tiller lines, but it's a lovely device. Those of you who followed closely know that I had many a conversation with Monty, my monitor wind vane. Yes, the Jordan series drogue is a wonder of engineering. It stops the boat cold. It is a booger to get back in the boat, no doubt about that. One needs to wait till seas are, I would say, well, not seas, but winds are down in the 20 to 25 knot range. Otherwise, you're not getting it in. So
I do the same thing on the keyboard.
Somebody's live.
Yeah, it's a very small world, the sailing community, because Kitty and I met Hans Bernwald on our first circumnavigation.
Right.
We had a Hassler wind vane, and then he decided he was going to make the monitor wind vane. And then also when we were in Tahiti, we met up with the guy that went around.
Bernard Motissier.
Bernard Motissier.
Yeah.
So to hear your stories, it's
That's
absolutely fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. I think Bernard's was homemade, I believe.
Pardon?
I think Bernard's wind vane was homemade.
I think,
Yeah.
yeah, we had an old Hassler.
Randall, we've got another question from Pam Wall, I think. Pam, do you want to go?
Oh, okay.
I don't have a question. I just want to say to Randall especially that every day that you were out there, I was waiting to hear from you. And it was almost like it was a personal email or letter to everybody that was also waiting for you. And I just wanted to know, when you finished your voyage, it was like putting down a great book and all you wanted to get was the next volume of it. So I just want to thank you for spending the time, the energy, and the wonderful conversations you had with Monty. I mean, I tell you what, Randall, you got to write a book with everything in it like you had, because that was just wonderful. And thank you for this great presentation.
Okay, Pam, I'm going to remind you of that when I actually publish the book. All right, so you'll have to put up when you. No, I didn't have access to comments to the website when I was at sea. I had really great internet, but not that good. But once I got ashore, Pam, I was able to read your comments. I believe you commented almost every day. So thank you for that loyalty. You boosted my website traffic by a lot. You and my mom. I think my mother checked my tracker every 10.5 minutes for the course of the year. So thank you to the two of you for making me jump up on Google Analytics. That was great.
Well, you know, the interesting thing, Randall, was that you know, you felt as though you wanted to respond to the wonderful messages that you sent out, and I appreciated that I even got anything back at all. But it was beautifully written, it was beautifully said, and I was with you every minute of the way. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It was a lot of fun. One wants discipline and habit at sea. One wants to be able to do things at certain times of the day, eat at certain times, sleep at certain times. And for me, write at certain times. It was part of my daily ritual to send the blog in. It was actually a good help to me, helped me to stay aware of my surroundings and not kind of drift off into nowhere land. So thanks for the comments. I appreciate that.
Got a comment or a statement from Ernie Godsalk, who I think is in Newport, Rhode Island. Ernie?
Oh, thank you. No, I've just, as I mentioned in the chat, I just finished reading the book Erebus, and and presently reading Terror. So it's fascinating to watch your route, which was the same as theirs. Fortunately, you got farther than they did.
Yeah. Those are the ones by Marco Polo, is that right?
Actually, Terror is by Dan Simmons, and the Erebus is by somebody else, and I've forgotten. I'm sorry, I've forgotten who it is.
No,
very interesting books, though.
Yeah, I've been reading. Now that I'm home, I have the luxury to read what I want, as opposed to reading things I need to read in order to prepare myself. So, oddly enough, I've been reading the journals of the Northwest Passage makers nonstop. You know, Franklin and Bach and McClure and McClintock, and I'm halfway through Life with the Eskimo by Charles Francis Hall. Beautiful books published by, it was called the Canadian Reprint Series, facsimiles of the original journals. Just awesome stuff. I'm really having a good time. And now that I've got a context for where they are, it makes the journals really come alive.
Sure does. And listening to you made them come alive too. Thank you very much.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you.
The crew of Totem are next, which I think is Behan Gifford.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say I know that name.
Do you want to come in, Behan? Nothing heard.
I apologize. It's me here. I'm sorry. I had my mic off, and but I just wanted to say congratulations on the incredible effort here. It's been really wonderful for us to sit here in Mexico, sweating it out, watching this, higher latitudes and big challenges, and just really impressed. And thank you, Randall, for the time you took today.
My pleasure.
It's very much enjoyed hearing the stories and seeing the dramatic pictures. It's quite a contrast with the desert next to us, except, wow, the Canadian Arctic sure looks a lot like Baja here at our port.
Doesn't it? Actually, that's a much better comparison than Arizona. It does look like the Baja. That's right.
Startling.
Yeah, that's really good. I never thought of that. Yeah, it's amazing. And of course it'll look like that for a long time, and then you wake up one morning, it's blowing a blizzard, and all you can see is white. So it's, that doesn't happen so much in Baja from my recollection. But thank you, I appreciate it, man. That's very very kind of you to say.
So you mentioned Daria Blackwell in your talk, Randall. Daria and Alex, Daria and Alex have got a question or a comment for you. Daria, Alex.
I'd like to ask something too.
Go ahead.
You go on.
Oh, it's not a question, it's a great comment. I love being a stowaway on your boat. I loved following you. It was just a great journey. And it was very safe being here in my office watching you out there.
Good. I'm very happy I could make it safe for you, Daria. That was definitely on the early project goal list. So good. No, thanks for your support. It was great to be supported by you. Thanks for your support, especially in those last few weeks as I was nearing home. That was,
my
was
pleasure.
very kind of you.
Randall, this is Alex here. Perhaps a question to give you something more to talk about. We love heaving too. We did have drogues on our boat, but we never ever deployed them except when we're at anchor. Why deploy a drogue instead of heaving two and then just setting sail again?
Because of, well, so on the first round, I deployed the drogue several times, and we saw kind of the experience I was having during round one of I wasn't really quite able to figure it out. I didn't deploy a drogue the second time at all. I sailed through everything on round two, and with the bigger sail. What Vito Dumas, I think, was saying, keep the sail up and keep going. And the couple who overwintered in the Arctic on the Joshua, I suddenly can't remember their names, Rolf. In any case, he's the guy who coined the term "speed is safety," especially in a boat like mine. So just pushed on and hard and went as fast as I thought I could. Never always faster than it felt like it was safe to be, but wasn't on round two. So never deployed a drogue and never hoped to. I think the answer to why no heaving two for me was simply that when I did, it never felt right. And this could just be my inability to get Mo in the right attitude. I was never really able to get more than like 60 degrees or so off the seas, and in seas like we were encountering in the South, that just didn't feel right. I got the same question. I had some friends who were making a Southern Ocean circuit, stopping at all of the islands around, South Georgia, the Crozettes, Kerguelen, and about 3 weeks, they were behind me, about 3 weeks after my big knockdown that I opened the presentation with, they were about in the same locality near the Crozettes as I was and experienced the same kind of weather, and they hoped too. The guy who was the skipper and owner of this boat named Drina has oodles of experience, has been sailing that boat everywhere for ancient days. His tactic has always been to heave to on the main, and about 2/3 of the way through the gale, they were absolutely raked. Took everything off the boat. Didn't actually dismast the boat, but took everything, like took the dinghy, took the Dodger, just ripped the boat to shreds. And that's kind of why I don't try to heave to. I'd never had a bad experience of it, but it never felt quite where I needed to be in a heavily breaking sea, and I felt safer on the drogue. That's not a great answer, right? I'm sure this is my handling of the boat rather than Mo's ability or lack of ability to heave to safely.
Actually, I think every boat acts differently when it's heaving to. And so you have to experience it on your own boat and be comfortable with it or not.
Yeah.
We have a catch, and when we heave to, it's usually staysail and mizzen, and that's it. And
oh, really?
We're very comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. That's all I could say.
Yeah.
Anyway, congratulations.
Yes, congratulations, and that was a great presentation. We really enjoyed it.
Randall,
Thank you.
Randall, we have another question on sail configuration from Steve James. Steve, do you want to come in?
Hi, Randall. A wonderful professional presentation. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
You spent a lot of time in heavy wind, going downwind. Were you sailing mostly with both your head sails pulled out and a well-reefed main at that time, or how were you managing that?
Yeah, obviously it depends on wind direction, but to a large degree, you're sailing in the northern quadrant of low pressure systems. So the wind comes, you're trying to go due east, and the wind is starting from the northwest and then veers around to the, backs around to the west and then into the southwest. So it's a lot of downwind sailing. And yes, I was able to, and this is again, thanks to the encouragement of Tony, I was struggling with, I'd not had a Solent rig or a double head sail rig before. I'd never had a boat with twin general poles, and twin general was right out front. So it took me a while to figure it out. And it took me a while to realize that, yeah, I could sail with twin head sails on poles, 3 reefs and a little bit better, with wind dead downwind at 35-40 pretty easily. I could do 35-40. Beyond that, the problem is that the pole is too long. As you if you keep rolling the sail forward, suddenly I could roll all day. I could probably carry 2 head sails into a huge wind if I could shorten the poles. But they're too long, and so you run out of runway, as it were, with the poles. So you have to take the poles in. And then the configuration for really heavy weather for me was just the number 2, one side or the other, depending on which, the way I was trying to head within the context of the low.
Well, okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing it all with us. I mean,
oh, you're welcome. Did that answer the question?
Yes,
Yeah,
I've never experienced anything like you experienced, and so I was curious at how long I could carry on doing what I do, and it seems that I might have to rethink what I would do in much heavier winds. So thank you very much.
Again, to Dara's point, everybody's different, so maybe your configuration is different from mine. By the time I got to that far, like, the 4th and 5th reef, as it were, well, there was just too much sail directly parallel to the wind, and they wouldn't fill. That was the challenge I had, but it's just a beautiful configuration for downwind heavy weather sailing. I really enjoyed sailing that way.
Great job.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
We've got a question from Lydia Strickland. Lydia?
Actually, it's not a question. I was just going to make a comment, Randall, that had we been fortunate enough to have had you speaking at the AGM, I dare say, based on this presentation, it would have gone down in the record books as one of the all-time best AGM talks.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm not sure exactly how one is supposed to reply to a compliment like that, but thank you.
with modesty.
Steve, when are you going to give yours about going around the horn?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I was just talking to Steve James, wondering when he's going to give a slideshow about going down around. Oh, he's muted.
Yeah. We've got a question from Tony Gibb again. Well, more of a statement, actually, but Tony, do you want to come in?
I'm sorry, I was muted. I'm answering Scott. I didn't make it around the horn, Scott. I'm not going to do that. I made it as far as Ushuaia, and I talked to Roxanne Diaz, and I know the people down there, and Randall is one of the people that I really enjoy. You meet people in places like that you cannot meet any place else in the world, and
Is that true? Yeah.
It's a fantastic, adventuresome group of people that are real people that know what they're all about, and so it's a wonderful place to go.
So your name is Scott, is that right?
Steve.
My name is Scott.
Steve. Okay, Steve. Well, Steve, let me just say 2 things briefly to you. One is departing is 90% of the problem. So once you get offshore Ushuaia, everything is just great. So don't worry about it. Just push off.
I saw that.
Okay. Number 2, in hindsight, I feel extremely lucky that the first attempt turned out the way it is from 2 perspectives. One is, to your point, I got to stop in some amazing places. Ushuaia was just incredible. And the people I met there were amazing. And then I got to stop in Hobart, and Hobart was just incredible, and the people were amazing. And without those accidents, I would not have had the opportunity to see those places or meet those people. And the other way I was fortunate there was that it turned out to be an extraordinarily difficult year in the Arctic. That was the summer of 2018. I think only Simon was telling me that one boat made it through each direction, and the chances were not good for me in 2018. Of course, I didn't know that when I made the change of mind, but it turned out to be a very fortunate set of unfortunate occurrences.
Well, congratulations on your determination. That's
Thank you.
Tony Gibb, do you want to come back in, Tony? I think you wanted to make more of a statement than a question, but you still online?
Nobody's giving me questions.
I think so. I think Tony's actually dropped off. Actually, looking at the screen, I did going that far south, Randall. Did you actually come across icebergs down there? Because presumably, that was the great limiters for the whitbreads and things, wasn't it? When they were doing those very
yes. Oh yes, for sure. That is the danger. I think I felt a lot more comfortable the second time, in particular because on the first go around, I had stopped in Ushuaia. I didn't go around Cape Horn, but I was right in there where the ice should have been. I saw nothing. I don't know actually how to account for it. I know that Tony, when he passed by and east of Cape Horn, saw lots and lots of bergs, lots of tabular birds in particular. I remember him telling me he saw one. He said it felt like it was as big as Manhattan, and that he would run the radar almost constantly. I saw nothing. Neither time did I see anything even remotely like ice. And I think after my sense is the real danger zone is closer in east of the Antarctic Peninsula where it flows, the conversion comes up. And once I got past there, especially the second time, I didn't even have the radar on most of the time.
And certainly your feat of concentration to stay awake and single hand through Northwest Passage is phenomenal. I can't imagine that at all.
Well, motivation is easy to come by when there's only one way out, right? There's no turning back, and so it's if you do want to go home and do want to see your wife again, motivation is easy to access.
So what's next for Molly? I mean, poor boat. I mean, does it need a rest, or did you realise that the rig had already been lost in the Southern Ocean? Did the previous owners come clean on that one?
Oh yes, what's next? I'm not sure. I think I've learned several things on the figure eight attempts. One is that high latitude sailing is deeply satisfying. Again, as I hinted, the amount of animal life that you are surrounded by in the Southern Ocean, the elemental quality of the wind and the waves. Not that I don't like trade wind sailing. Please do not take that as an inference. But my goodness, being able to sail in the South is great. And I remember I had on board a book by Jerry Clark named, Tony, you'll have to help me with the pronunciation, Tony Gibb, who chided me so terribly for my misspellings.
Totorore
Voyage. In which this sailor, Jerry Clark, left from, I believe it was New Zealand, and stopped at all of the islands that he could get to, which I think were all of them, doing bird counts. And what I realized is I loved being down there, but I went too quickly. Mo is not fast, but she's too fast. And so my vision would be Southern Ocean or high Arctic, high latitude sailing, high north sailing, where I get to slow down a little bit and actually see what's going on. So I don't know, nothing, as I said, Simon, to you the other day, my credit, my relationship account with my wife's credit is a little bit low at the moment, having been away for the better part of 3 or 4 years. So I'm making deposits to that account, and when we feel like it's come above zero, we will begin to discuss more thoroughly next. There will be next. No, Mo's not tired. That's an amazing thing about this boat. Maybe this is a function of metal boats. I don't know, but no, she's good for many more goes, I believe.
Fantastic.
So I'm looking forward to being along for the ride on several more.
Randall, there's no more written questions, so I'm going to ask people. We've still got about 38 people, 37 people online. So I'm going to ask people just to open their microphones and maybe take a couple more questions if that's okay with you. Does anybody want to open their microphone on a first come, first served basis and put their question to Randall, or comment or statement or whatever? Apart from buy his book, of course. You've got to buy his book.
Thank you.
Thank you, Randall. I just wanted to say that your presentation was as good as your writing, which was always a delight.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very kind.
It's funny Tony Gooch, it's funny you talk about the Southern Ocean, Randall. I remember one time when I was down there, I realized that about 2,500 miles away from any other person in the world.
Yeah.
The nearest person to me was probably a scientist down in Antarctica.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, what a pleasure, what a privilege to be able to be in such a place in this crowded world that we all live in.
Yeah, I have had that same epiphany. Yeah, just a privilege to see that wild world. I mean, the wildlife that's around us down there is very likely never seen a human. During the Southern Ocean rounding for me, I saw 2 ships, one of right near Cape Horn twice, and nothing the rest of the time. Yeah, my wife sent a note at one point. She said, some people on shore have figured out that where you are right now, you're closer to the space station and its crew than you are to any human on the globe, which I thought was kind of romantic. So yeah, I agree with you, Tony. That's an excellent comment.
So you're expert on social distancing, which is kind of useful at the moment.
Yeah, that's the joke in the house, actually, that social distancing for Randall has not been all that hard.
Great.
Can I just say to Randall how enjoyable his talk was, and what came across to me amongst many things is just how honest you are. Like the great adventurers that I've met over my life who've looked nature with all its raw power in the face have tended to have that sense of modesty and open-mindedness and a willingness to learn despite all the amazing things they've done. That came across in spades to me, which makes the voyage that much more impressive. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. You know, having seen what we've seen, humbleness is not difficult to come by. So, but thank you. I appreciate that remark. That's very kind.
That's great, Nick. Anybody else want to come in?
I would like to just one more time, Randall, your book, your beautiful picture book with a lot of dialogue, but not nearly enough for me, is wonderful. And anyone who wants to get a fabulous book, I hope this is volume 1 and volume 2 will be even better. But this one is terrific, and anyone who wants a great book to be able to keep sort of Randall's voyage really handy for you. It's got fantastic photographs and also very cool descriptions. Thank you, Randall. It's a great book.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, I'll go off the slide. Anyone else? It's still daylight here, so I've got plenty of. Simon, I feel bad for you, my friend. It must be approaching midnight your way.
Oh, it's no problem. It's been a great evening, Randall. We've really enjoyed it. It's been fantastic getting to know you and hear the story. It's been wonderful. Tony, are you wanting to come back in?
I need to say, Randall, you know, I wish you could turn Molly around and come back up to the Pacific Northwest. It's lovely cruising up here.
I need to plug you in with a conversation with my wife, who having born and raised in the UK, she's somewhat allergic to rain. So, but yes, I'm with you. I'm with you 100%.
Well, I tell you what, we'll have some great times when Joe gets up here, because sometimes it doesn't rain.
I'll tell her that. I'm not sure she'll believe you, but I will tell her.
We're probably coming to the end, I would have thought, Randall. You've been talking pretty much constantly for an hour and a half, which is a phenomenal undertaking. One more question or one more statement, one more congratulatory message. So anybody else want to come in? Oh, we've got something popped up there. High praise from Ellen, who did the talk on the muckways. She's something. Thanks again for an inspiring talk, Randall. So on that note, I'll wind up if I may. It's been a fantastic evening, really inspirational talk. You thoroughly deserved your Barton Cup, and hopefully we'll get to meet face to face when this wretched COVID nonsense is all over and done with, and it'll be good to catch up in somewhere, Annapolis, San Francisco, Greenland, wherever. But yeah, thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It's been a lot of fun.
That's been great. Thank you.
Yes, Randall.
Ah, say what you mean by the ping, ping, ping.
Yeah, Randall, that was fantastic. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, Simon.
Super talk. Have you given it many times before? Is it, you obviously a fairly polished presentation.
Good, thank you. Yeah, it's doesn't quite come naturally, but I hope it flows a little bit now. So yeah. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Oh.
And hopefully next year we can actually get together.
Yep, that would be good. Hopefully in Annapolis if that happens. Fantastic.
Okay.
I got a logo.
Hey, thank you, Victor. Take care, Victor. Nice to chat with you. Almost. Nice to see you. I've never actually seen you. Good to see you, sir. Thank you for all the help.